Well, I want to welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on the last 30 minutes of your morning before lunch for the second part of a series webinar put together by CTC Talent Partners on strengthening your hiring and workforce strategy. Lots of questions related to that, but how do you go ahead and put something formalized together to kind of efficiently run that? And we're excited. CTC's been a fantastic partner. They're providing information for us. And one of the things that ABC is kind of positioned to do is we want to be able to help build better companies by transforming people. And we do that. One of the five ways we do that is by informing your decisions. And so this is one of those informing the industry webinars for those of you who are joining us, just to help you make better decisions, find great resources. I call them frequently, so feel free to reach out. They would love it, and they will be
Yeah.
happy to help. They're great. Both Jason and Adam have been fantastic partners. So I'll just let everyone know I'm Greg George, President and CEO of ABC Western Michigan. Probably have seen, it looks like I've seen several of your faces at different events, so welcome. And I'm going to turn this thing right over to Adam and Jason and let them take it away.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you and ABC for putting this on. And thanks to everybody who decided to tune in on the snowy Wednesday morning. Hopefully, everybody's commutes are safe. And thank you all for being here. As Greg had alluded to, this is the second part of a two-part webinar series. The first part was last month. Anybody who attended that and anyone who I believe is part of the HR peer group that's tied to ABC should have gotten a copy of the presentation slides and also a recording. Same will be done here following this webinar as well. So appreciate everybody joining and want to just make sure this is extremely interactive. We want to make sure that everybody leaves here with picking up some good nuggets, things that they can take back that'll hopefully help you and your companies. We want to leave plenty of time to answer any questions, comments that come up. So there's a chat section just like last time. Feel free to enter anything through the chat. We'll be Greg and Jason and myself will be monitoring it. We'll leave plenty of time to address questions at the end. So really appreciate it. Want to just quickly kind of cover the topics that we're going to go through today, and just at a high level. And we really want to just talk about what success looks like when it comes to hiring, and what happens when it goes wrong. And at the end of the day, oops, excuse me, skipping around here a little bit, but building that hiring team, want to make sure there's clear roles. Everybody's assigned a role, in terms of what they're going to be doing throughout the process, planning and communication each step of the way, providing timely feedback and delivering strong job offers for the candidates that you and your company are excited about. You want them to move forward and join the team, how to keep people engaged before they step foot in your inside your building, and then obviously talking through best practices from contractors. We'll look forward to hearing your thoughts on what's working. We can share that as well. And the goal here really is to create a successful hiring process that's repeatable and scalable for everybody inside their organization for all roles. And just want to quickly talk through kind of the buckets of we think about success in hiring, what winning looks like, and maybe the pain points of not winning. And running that timely interview process. It's really important for accountability purposes to make sure that there's timely feedback, that there is accountability loops created in terms of when next steps are for each step of the process, creating an incredible candidate experience. And a lot of times everybody's really working hard to make sure that they create a very positive client experience, which is mission critical. But same could be said about putting yourself in the lens of a candidate or a prospective hire when they go through the interview process with your company. What sort of experience are you giving off? And then what are they sharing with other people in the market? Hopefully, it's very positive. Disqualifying the wrong people early. This is a win. This is success. Companies are not spending their time in the wrong areas with the wrong people that don't make sense. And of course, if we're everybody's winning together, more offers are being extended and they're being accepted. You want that offer to acceptance ratio to be hopefully close to 100% as possible. And Jason, wanted to kick it over to you, maybe to talk a little bit about setting those expectations before the interview process kicks off.
Yeah, yeah, and as you can see on the slide here, Adam, a lot of meat, but I'll simplify this into one sentence. Yeah, if no one knows who's got the baton, the race is probably already over. So when roles of your hiring team are not defined in the interview process, you might get three people emailing the same candidate, nobody following up, and you leave the candidates left thinking that, do these people even want to hire me? What's taking them so long? What's going on here? That's when they take a call from a competitor or decide to stay where they're at. So when we're thinking about kind of how you set up your hiring team, who's doing what, every search needs to have those clearly defined roles, and they might vary depending on the specific position you're recruiting for, but kind of just give you an overall framework. You're going to need we'll call it your quarterback. That's the person that's running the process. That's your facilitator, your initial point of contact, setting things up. You're going to need your technical guru. So someone that's a subject matter expert. So for pre-construction, it might be a director of pre-con or a senior estimator that's involved in the process. They're the ones that are going to help with the technical vetting. If there's more nuanced questions that the candidate has, that's probably going to be the person they're going to go to. Lastly, you're going to need someone who's going to be your closer, someone that when it comes time to make an offer, who's going to present that offer, right? Who's developed that strong relationship with the candidate. The last one matters more than people realize, and it's fluid. So there's going to be instances where the candidate's going to connect with someone from the ops team, or they're going to connect with someone from the leadership team, maybe a CEO or president, or they might connect with your facilitator who happens to be that great kind of cultural glue. So you got to read the room, you got to adapt. But most important, it's about that candidate experience and keeping them warm and engaged throughout the process. So even the candidates you don't end up hiring have great things to say about the organization and the interview process. We mentioned here the 48-hour feedback loop. This is mission critical. This is probably where most candidate deals are lost. I can't tell you how many times we've had a good candidate in the right situation where just that, again, that candidates get nervous. They assume you're not interested and they're going to take something else. So even if it's a quick, hey, we're still thinking or not decided or someone's out of vacation, it goes a long way to keeping that candidate confidence high and making sure that if it's someone you want, you're in a position to land them. Um, when it comes to the timeline, right, we want to have a crystallized timeline up front from first interview through offer stage. Again, where we've seen companies lose deals is when the process gets elongated. We understand people are out of town, things get busy, and hey, if a process gets delayed a week or two, no problem. But when weeks turn into months, again, that's where candidates lose interest. Speed builds confidence, and time kills deals. So mission critical that understanding and giving candidates a clear timeline of what that looks like, first, second, third interview to offer stage. Um, the last piece we mentioned here is just understanding the difference between your active and your passive candidates, and some people understand this distinction, and others it's a little it's kind of new what that means. An active candidate is somebody that's on job boards, they're on LinkedIn, they're on Indeed, they're on ZipRecruiter, they're applying everywhere. They have a lot of pain. They're looking to make a change immediately. Um, on the flip side, your passive candidates, maybe the ones you really want, they're the ones that are somewhat happy at their current employer, but maybe there's something missing. They're open to a conversation. They're in a good spot. They're not on job boards. They're not actively looking. These are the folks that are going to need a clear value proposition, a clean professional process, and most importantly, absolute confidentiality. People get super nervous. A lot of times we advocate, hey, if you want to do something on the phone or Zoom as a first conversation, or even meeting off campus sometimes at a neutral location makes people feel more comfortable. Just in summary, to wrap this piece up, the clarity piece creates confidence, confidence creates speed, and speed wins talent.
Thanks, Jason. And from a compensation standpoint, we have obviously some things listed of what winning looks like and not winning, but there's some wonderful resources out there in the local community, and I'm sure many of you are already using, some sort of comp studies, keeping apprised of what's going on in the market, using data with your current team. Obviously, we're a resource. ABC's got great resources as well. So that's important just to set that baseline to think about before the search. What is the appropriate compensation range for this position if I'm hiring for it? And similarly, looking at the benefits and perks, making sure that those are competitive with the market and your competition as well, just as important. And once those salary ranges have been identified for the positions, just keeping in mind and accounting for that companies may have to offer a range that's above those averages to attract top talent. There will be maybe an acquisition cost, if you will, to that. And this is especially true for candidates that are coming from a competitor. They're, as Jason mentioned, probably a passive candidate. And as we know, compensation and benefits is not the only factor that someone's thinking about when considering a move, but it is certainly one of the most important factors. And is always perceived risk when someone is making a move to another company. It's just the unknown. So this is one way to help mitigate that risk, is to make sure compensation and benefits are in line and someone is leveling up when they do make a move. And before beginning the search as well, for example, if it's a project manager, if somebody's looking to hire for that role, once those salary ranges have been identified, want to make sure that a company is looking at their existing team and already project managers in that role doing the same work, and identifying if there is a discrepancy or a disparity between those ranges and where those folks are, making sure that that gets addressed immediately before the search begins. And ideally, you do not want to set a trend where new hires are coming in being compensated at a much higher range than existing team members. That can clearly negatively impact the retention or future retention of your current staff. And if for whatever reason a contractor is unable to make these adjustments with their existing team, our recommendation has always been hold off on this new search and this hire. And in fact, we've had an instance recently where we made that recommendation. Much better to just hold off rather than go down a path if it doesn't make sense to do so. And additionally, if the benefits and perks are not comparable to your competitors, this will create a very significant gap that will need to be addressed when you get to the offer stage with candidates in order to remain competitive. So just wanted to hit just those points there. We did cover in terms of, obviously turnaround time being very, very important there, that Jason had mentioned that with making sure that there is a process that, you're not losing anybody that's engaged. And Jason, did you want to maybe dive in a little bit to the feedback from the hiring
Yeah,
team after the interviews?
yeah. So obviously, once you get a candidate in, figuring out if it's the right candidate, or if there was something off, is mission critical to be able to timely, execute on your search, find the right person, put an offer out, and ultimately hire them. So managing your time in the recruiting process is all about ensuring you're fishing in the right pond. Each interview is an opportunity to sharpen your vetting skills. The more time you spend with candidates, the better, the better your filter becomes of what's working and what's not, or who's a fit and who's not a fit, but most importantly, why. A lot of folks talk to great individuals, but they might not be the best fit for the organization. And sometimes it might take one, two, or even and three interviews, especially if it's a new position, to really kind of hone in on what that ideal candidate profile is. But if you're in your fifth or sixth interview and you're still kind of not sure, that's probably a chance to take a step back and figure out, like, where are we off the mark as a team. If you don't do that, if you don't do those things, you end up burning a ton of calories on the wrong candidates. And as we all know, interview fatigue is a real thing. People get just tired of the process. It's de-energizing, it's draining if you keep swinging and missing. Um, in terms of the timeliness of the feedback, again, I'm going to keep harping on the 48-hour rule. It's really something that we consider non-negotiable. If priorities change, if another candidate jumps ahead, if it's not the right fit, say it fast. Dragging people along doesn't help anybody. The fastest way to win talent is to be clear, decisive, and honest. The fastest way to lose it is silence.
So now, as we go through the process, it's exciting. You get a really interested prospective new hire, a candidate, and getting closer to the offer stage, and hopefully everything's going to come together. And just wanted to outline a little bit of what that can look like, in terms of what success looks like with, pre-closing that candidate. We reference on here what we call a comparing opportunities exercise. We're going to cover this later in the presentation, which in greater detail to talk through that process, but that is going to be important for the candidate to go through and complete that exercise as part of that process right before an offer gets extended. And a company is walking a candidate through that. Just a couple things to just cover on this. We know, and again, going back to what Jason said, obviously everybody's going to have a role in the hiring team. Whoever is designated as that go-to point person to deal with the candidate, that's where they're going to be communicating directly with the candidate to let them know that an offer is upcoming, and that's where together they can coordinate a time to sit down and go through offer details. And want to kind of take a step back and put our candidate hat on, or if we're going through the interview process, want to make sure that it's a personal experience. And if you get an email of an offer versus maybe somebody taking the time to sit down with you and walk through it, it's probably apples and oranges, right? So making sure that the candidate, you're building that relationship with them. If you can sit down with them, if you can talk through it, that's always ideal versus just sending an email without context. And we always prefer, if possible, meeting that candidate in person, whether it's them coming to the office, or as Jason said, if there's a little bit of apprehension, with confidentiality, even meeting offsite for a coffee, lunch, whatever that may be, sitting down and presenting that offer, but not just the offer details and numbers and benefits, sitting down to talk about, the vision of the company, what this person's expected to do, what success looks like, and what a future path looks like. So it really is crystal clear, and they see it. And also important to see that body language, right? To see the level of engagement for a candidate, or if there's a concern or a question, it can be addressed immediately, and that offer can be revised on the spot. So, but obviously, if that cannot happen, if there's logistical challenges and the in-person meeting cannot happen, we always recommend then the virtual meeting being the preferred alternative. Jason, did you want to talk about that
Yeah,
next
yeah,
step
yeah.
once the
So
offer's in and accepted?
yeah, so this used to be, 5, 10 years ago when someone would sign their offer letter, kind of you figure the process was done. You go in to resign, and it's always, hey, it was best of luck. We understand why you're making the change. The door is always open if you want to come back. Post-COVID, it's a different world. The pressure companies put on candidates, both with financially and emotionally to stay. It's a whole new ball game. You're kind of sitting in this 2 week purgatory that's incredibly difficult. No one's really prepared for this. It's kind of a new trend that we've seen where it's a little bit of self-reliance. A hiring man, you go to resign and your boss, it becomes his neck's on the line now if you leave. So they're going to do everything they can to get you to stay. Um, it's candidates kind of feel like they're on an island. It's a little bit awkward sometimes in the office knowing that they're leaving. Sometimes the company, they don't tell the rest of the employees, and you don't know who knows you're leaving. It's kind of a weird, murky period. So it's really mission critical for companies to have a strong touch plan, an engagement plan to keep folks warm during this process. So we've seen a few different things, a couple of them outlined here, whether it's a team lunch, a project site visit, having them come in to do a paperwork or, a drug test or whatever they need to do before they start. During the, this past holiday season, we had a couple guys and gals go into some company Christmas parties. Another one had a one-on-one meeting with the direct report to go over some projects so he could get a kind of a jump start when he started. Other companies they all have offered early sign-on bonuses. When someone signs their offer letter, they get a check sight unseen. So, they're financially now committed to the company, and we've seen kind of the counter offers decrease from those things. Um, Kind of switching gears, I know Adam mentioned the comparing opportunities exercise. A lot of what we've talked about before, before up until this point has been more from the client lens. We want to give you guys a little bit of insight into the candidate's mind when, what they're thinking about when they're determining if they're making a career change or not.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I want to dive into this a little bit, and actually, this is an exercise we've used for a long time And obviously, it's a helpful tool for all sides, right? It's from a candidate standpoint, when they go through and they're with their current company and they start an interview process with another company, it's a really big decision. And it's one of the most important decisions in their life and their family's life in order to, if they are going to consider a new career change in a new company. And so this tool, what it's allowed candidates to do is objectively evaluate one opportunity versus the next and make sure that they're making an informed decision that makes sense for themselves and families. On the company contractor side, this allows the candidate to be able to, in a transparent manner, share, what they like, any concerns, what's most important to them, and then what they're looking for in an offer. So it takes a lot of that guesswork out. Of course, us being a third party firm, we're helping to facilitate this between our client partners and a candidate. But obviously, if we're not in the equation or recruiting firms not, clearly a company can take this process and implement it and work directly with candidates as well. So this just kind of outlines what it is, and we'll obviously share in subsequent slides. When is it shared with the candidate? On here, and just want to use disclaimer because Jason will probably talk about this, but we kind of say, hey, it's going to be maybe a little bit different for every search, but when do you share this with a candidate? We may actually share it with the candidate early on just to set the table so they know about it. When to complete it, it's probably going to be after an initial interview or two when, let's say, all sides, let's say a contractor and a candidate are both very interested, and it looks like we're trending toward that offer stage. I know there's a lot of info on this slide, and we'll obviously provide a little more granular detail in the following slides here, but this is just a little bit about the process, the steps below for candidates to take when completing it, when ready to do so. And wanted to just quickly say before going through this, it's actually a really nice test to really gauge the candidate's level of interest as well, because in some instances in the past, we found that candidates really haven't even made the time to complete this. So that's kind of telling within itself how important it is and what a priority is. I mean, between their current company and the obligations there, family, other things, if they're not invested and committed, then it's probably not the right fit, and it's probably not worth continuing the process. And we don't want the company to waste any time. So that's within itself, that does test to see the candidate's level of engagement. But also, first and foremost, it's setting a baseline. What are the factors that are most important to this candidate when they are making that decision and evaluation? And it's going to be a little different for every candidate, but we have compiled over many years of doing this, kind of thought starters of what we see are most important. And then we will ask the candidate and probably a spouse or family member to go through and look at that list, identify what is most important. They will add anything that may be missing from our list, and then stack rank that from most important to least important. Then you got a baseline. And from there, in sort of a spreadsheet format, there'll be a column and a section for their current company and employer, and then one for the company that they're considering. And there'll be a section for pros or likes. Hey, what do I like? Questions or concerns, and any comments that I want to add. So what's nice is for the questions and concerns column, as it pertains to a company they're interviewing with, as they complete this, if a company has access to this information, they can actually use this to address these matters in subsequent interviews to make sure that the candidate feels comfortable, they have the information they need in order to make a decision. So it's a little more intentional with those interviews, future interviews. And then as far as the points in time, we're actually looking at 2 points in time today, real time. And then if the candidate had the proverbial crystal ball 3 to 5 years from now, looking inside there, what does that look like evaluating the two opportunities? And the last step would be compensation and benefits. And we have it here last for a reason, because this shouldn't be where you start, it's where you finish. It should be a formality that we know compensation and benefits should be in line, but there will be a section for the candidate to do a side-by-side comparison to make sure that everything lines up and that makes sense. So that will be a part of the process. Once the candidate completes that, we have them send it over to us, or in this case, if they're working directly with the company, send that over to the company for them to review, set up a time to talk with the candidate, address any of these questions and concerns, and actually talk through and formulate the offer and present to them. Jason, did you want to kind of go through some of these factors?
Yeah, yeah. So these are the, I think there's 14 on here. These were the kind of key factors we identified, when folks are thinking about considering a career change. And to Adam's point earlier, everybody's going to stack rank these a little bit differently. And this is something that me personally, I used to send this to candidates probably before a final interview. But depending on the candidates now, I'm actually including this in some of my preps where we're going to talk about these things. So going into a first interview, it gives them a little more direction and kind of narrow their focus, especially for somebody that maybe hasn't interviewed in a while or that's maybe more a little bit more data driven. Maybe some of your engineer types, your estimators. Maybe superintendents, they don't need all this information. They just want to make a decision. So every candidate's a little bit different from this standpoint. But this piece is really about self-discovery. The sell can come from a third party like us, and even coming from companies, sometimes obviously, take it with a grain of salt. People have to go through this, whether it's with a spouse or by themselves or just a trusted advisor in their networks. It's about asking themselves these questions and actually writing it down. To Adam's point earlier, when you spend the time to do it, number one, you're more committed to the process, but also it gives all of us great information, whether it's something that needs to be flushed out in a subsequent interview, or it might be something to say, hey, you know what? This isn't for me. And as I'm going through these factors, it just, hey, where I'm at, it's probably better than this opportunity. I'm going to withdraw from the process, which is totally fine. And what we don't want to do is waste anybody's time. So I think going through this process helps us narrow the focus of what we're looking for and gives clients and us an opportunity to address these things as candidates move forward in the process. So this is what it looks like kind of within our spreadsheet. So with respect to each one of these, you're going to kind of put your pros and cons, your questions and concerns, and your comments. So we've done these with candidates and kind of ask them questions and help them through this process. Other times people want to go in a think tank and do it by themselves, but it's an incredibly effective exercise. Even again, we share it with our friends in other industries. Anybody that's thinking about making a career change, this is a very useful tool and a very useful exercise to go through. So again, sometimes it helps you solidify a deal and narrow focus, and sometimes it helps you disqualify faster.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this earlier too. Bringing in a significant other, typically people are going to do that, and that's pretty powerful as well. That they get a say so, and they go through it together as a family. So it's
And
been
if this
pretty.
part doesn't make sense, like we won't even talk about the money piece, which is our next slide. But this has to make sense, and then we'll figure out the money. That's kind of that's how we share it with candidates. So going into the comp piece. What we see a lot of the time is candidates and companies focusing mostly on a base salary and maybe a sign-on bonus or a vehicle allowance. There's 8 or 9 components to a package, sometimes more depending on the company. What we really try to understand is at the end of the year, how much money do you have in the bank? Right? We have clients that don't have great insurance or don't offer vehicle allowances, but have huge base salaries, and vice versa, clients with amazing benefits that may offer a car with lower salaries. So there might be a sticker shock one way or the other when you break down someone's compensation package into more granular detail. It really helps understand like what's it going to take for you to say yes to this offer. It creates a level of transparency, removes the guesswork, and provides parties with all clarity in order to make an informed decision. And what this lets us do, there isn't much back and forth. When we put offers out, it's usually just an acceptance or a decline. There's not too much negotiation because of this transparency. Also, that allows the offer process not to get elongated unnecessarily. You're not going to have a 7-day negotiation period. You might need 3, 4, 5 days to think about it, ask questions, but generally with this level of transparency, it's going to be a quick yes or no.
Well, that's all we had. Tried to be as succinct and as possible. Just want to open it up to see if there's any questions, comments. Would love to hear from anybody that has anything. We really appreciate the time and the opportunity.
I'll let anybody chat. I got a couple here that popped in, and I have some that are mine. I won't share which ones are mine and which ones are the others in the group. So I'm gonna they ping me separately.
Sure.
Um, So the importance of a clear, what I'm kind of digesting from this question is a clear compensation range. Like
Mhm.
how does not having that create issues? Like if job candidates are looking and it's a large range or there's no range, how does that how does that impact the offer and the experience?
It's going to create a lot of uncertainty and a lot of guessing and generally a lot of wasted time if you don't know those things. Usually you try to, during a first conversation with a candidate, understand what they're looking for. In terms of compensation. And we do have, sometimes you do work with broad ranges, and it's going to depend on someone's experience and what their role might look like within that specific company. So you try to leave it, you also don't want to narrow yourself into a tiny box either and say like we're only going to pay $120,000 for this role. So there's kind of a balance between being, hey, we have a comp bands, it's probably up to 130, 140 for the right candidate, if it makes sense, our client might go beyond that. So we try to advise giving not necessarily hard and fast, like they don't need to be stuck with that ceiling. But if you don't have anything to go on, it's just a guessing game, and it's going to leave candidates and companies frustrated and not getting the result.
I wanted to add to that too, to what Jason's point. There, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, Greg, but there's like an internal and external component too, where internally, whatever your range you decide, just making sure that the current team that's adjusted and make sure that they're at that salary level before going in and acquiring talent. So that's really key too, to make sure you can do that because again, people coming in should not be compensated 30%, 40% more than somebody doing the same role, assuming apples to apples, right? So that's a big piece of that internally. But then also, one of the things that we actually go through the process with contractors, and obviously contractors can do this on their hiring team, is actually identifying a list of some profiles of candidates that could be a fit and determining, maybe this is my range, but if I did find the right person, would I be willing to elevate that range a little bit? And then there's some openness there, even if I've identified something, just to make it clear, because it can be kind of vague and abstract if you don't have, because not all resumes are created equal for a fit for a company. So we always recommend maybe going through that process as well on the front end.
Another question relates to like how do you know like when the person isn't the right fit? How long do you keep interviewing? That kind of thing. It's kind of the questions around that. Timing of wrong candidate, I guess, is how I'm gonna shorten it down.
Yeah. Adam, you want
Uh,
me to take this or you want to take it?
Well, Jason, jump in after. I was going to say
Yeah.
one thing. When you say wrong fit, it's a great question. The wrong fit. So I guess the first thing I'd say is it the right person, wrong seat, right? So is this person a cultural fit? Could they maybe fit somewhere else or in the future? Or is this flat out just not a fit? Maybe wrong person, wrong seat altogether. So I think identifying that first. Clearly, if it's, wrong person, wrong seat, the process can probably cease there, and then sharing that feedback very timely as we go back. The 48-hour rule, that works both ways, whether someone's a fit or they're not a fit. If it's the right person, wrong seat, that would probably, have internally, the company would probably be having some conversations to figure out, can this first person fit? If so, in what capacity, what timeline, those types of things. So hopefully I addressed that question. Jason, if you wanted to elaborate on that, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I usually see it, or we usually see it with companies that are lukewarm on somebody, right? If it's a for sure no, that's not the most difficult judgment call to make. But if someone has some positive qualities, but they're just not sure, that's where that timely feedback and having that substantive debrief to really narrow in our focus on what we like and what we didn't like. And that's where, as a third party, the client might ask you to do some vetting, right? They might ask for, hey, we didn't cover this. We were unsure about these things. We had some concerns here. Why don't you talk to the candidate, get some more information? What we don't want to do is waste everybody's time. We don't want to waste 5 or 6 people from a hiring team getting involved, putting resources into building relationships and spending time in the interview room when it doesn't make sense to. So it's usually that in between, that feedback stage is mission critical to make that determination on those lukewarm candidates.
And let's see here. Last one. Um, see, how do I say this? How, so oftentimes if they're looking, from what it looks like, it sounds like that if you know the candidate might be interviewing in a couple different positions, you got someone who's good, you want to make an offer or you're gonna make an offer, but you lose them to a counter offer. So what what's likely to cause that in that process is kind of the gist of this question, where the market's the experienced folks you're looking at getting, if they're looking, they could be looking in multiple places. They're likely got the experience, and so how does that impact? How could you lose them? What shouldn't you do to lose them, I guess, in that offer period?
Yeah, no, great question. And you see some common trends having done this a while where people kind of where that might happen. And it's really about, I mean, it starts with the candidate experience from the moment they interview through an offer and acceptance and kind of that 2 week purgatory when they're, from resignation to start date. Going through that comparing opportunities exercise, you'll start to figure out where there's dangers of a counteroffer and why, right? And
Mhm.
make sure that's being addressed. We always tell people if you're making a change, like does the change solve the problem? There needs to be a narrative when someone's making a move. If it's just money, those are the ones where we typically see counteroffers happen. If money can solve a problem, most companies that don't want to lose you, they're going to step up and write a check. If that's the only reason they're making a move, those are deals we generally tell our clients be very careful. There's a higher likelihood of this candidate taking a counter offer versus someone else that is making a move for, hey, I want to, the commute or the type of work or our company's struggling. Those are strong, compelling reasons to make a change. So it's really about identifying the narrative of change and knowing like what the likelihood might be that they're going to take a counter offer.
Can I add to that, guys, real quick?
Yeah.
One other thing too is, and I know that we talked about this a little bit earlier, is to understanding the difference between someone who's active and someone passive as well. And so the folks that are active, clearly, and on job boards, talking to a lot of people, they're ready to make a move. They're more motivated, and then that is a little more competitive. Someone who's more passive, there's going to have to be, as Jason mentioned, a very compelling value proposition the company's going to have to convey to this person, go over and above to share that and sell the opportunity and the culture, because versus them, just deciding to stay with their current company, because that's sometimes the path of least resistance to stay, even if this company that they're considering interviewing with is a better fit for them. So really making sure that that is very clearly communicated, identifying that, and that, as Jason said, part of that hiring team, there's someone there that's going to be able to be that champion and advocate for the organization.
Yeah, and one last point on that, I would say that your closer, your champion, that person's role is mission critical. How the offer is delivered, what that 2 week, the communication between resignation and start date looks like. That can be the difference between someone taking a counter offer and someone starting with your company.
I just thought of something as you were walking through that, and then this is mine, like the what do you call it, the comparing opportunity stuff. Is there something that, and I think you did touch on this a little bit, is there a way to vet kind of your current makeup of employees through some of this lens before hiring? So as you're looking, you're looking, you also don't want to lose anyone during the same process. So what you're looking at selling, is it matching what you're doing internally? Are there tools within what you're talking about in either webinar, I guess, that can be utilized to like kind of just benchmark yourself with your current makeup?
Yeah, I love the question. So going back to this, so everybody can see the visual, Greg. Yes. So if you think about these factors, there certainly can be an element, and certainly in a process, if we're talking to a company, one of the things we want to understand is the culture and why do people enjoy the company and why are they staying, right? So there's a lot of good nuggets in making sure that companies, and I know there's engagement surveys, hopefully there's regular cadences with your team, beyond just the annual review, to really get a feel for why this company is unique. Why have I decided to stay here? Why do I love it here? Why am I an advocate? So leaning on your existing team to get that information, and there's absolutely probably a way to repurpose this or use this kind of template and actually organically say these are the reasons why our team has said they enjoy the experience here, right? So
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Any last minute thoughts, questions? You can even feel free to unmute if you just don't want to type it in. I'll leave a minute for that or so. Again, appreciate the information. So as people are thinking, if something pops up, I'll stop. But we recorded the webinar. As soon as it gets processed, we'll get it out, and then we'll send a recap of it to everyone that registered and attended, and it'll be available, and you can share it amongst your team, and anyone else. You can rewatch it and click back through it. So we'll attach the slide deck as well as a video for the recording, and put it out there for everyone. So again, really appreciate everybody joining for the Informing the Industry webinar. Appreciate Adam and Jason and their team for kind of just putting this content together. Hiring is challenging. I'm noticing that it's a little slower for some of those entry level positions, but the heat is on always for those experienced folks that are, you know, top of mind that you need to fill in a role. So, thinking about how this process works and communicating it as you're doing it will help you like seal the deal with the candidate as you're competing for some of these top talented folks. Because there's a lot of them over here in West Michigan, and you offer, we have a lot of great members and they all have great cultures, but sometimes switches happen, and that's wonderful. You should, if you're in that market and you're looking to hire somebody, we want you to help. We want to help you win that. So hopefully this is a webinar that lives on. We've even talked about having Adam and Jason kind of do something as markets change or as things shift, kind of just like a refresher for members, yearly, something like that. So again, thanks everybody for attending. We'll have a follow-up. If you have follow-up questions, you may already have this, but I think I included Adam or Jason's contact information. Reach out to them directly. They'd be happy to
Great.
chat with you.
Great.
And of course, if it's easier to just email the team here, we can directly connect you too. So um, thanks again. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And hopefully your belly's full from lunch and whatever you had while we were watching. Talk soon. See you guys.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.